DeRico Symonds, get it. So as much as I know in terms of my family history, at least I know I can go back third generation African Nova Scotian. Certainly I know that my family tree goes back further than that, but as much as I know, I can guarantee that I'm at least third generation African Nova Scotian. My mother is from Mulgrave Park. My grandmother is part Indigenous from Truro, moved here when she was 14 and resided in Beachville. My father is from North Preston, and I grew up in what's known as the pubs, public housing community in HRM. And I mean, I smile when I talk about that community because growing up there was a lot of struggles, but there was also a lot of fun. And for me, there's strength in the struggle. And so, the first iteration of dedication and determination that I saw was my mom. And that's, kind of instilled in me as a kid. And there's a lot of things that I got into and a lot more things that I could have gotten into, but how dare I let all the work that my mother did be in vain. And, there were times that my mom would lie and say she wasn't hungry, but really in reality there just wasn't enough food to go around. My mom would work 2 jobs. At points my mom sold drugs. It was what it was. But she did what she had to do to make sure that I and my brothers, I have 2 brothers, one older, one younger, so I'm in the middle, to make sure that we had the life. We had a better life than what she had lived. And so my mom was born into public housing. She no longer lives in public housing because I was blessed enough to be able to save throughout my career and get a house, and my mom now lives there. And so growing up as a young black male, I say that as kids, we're so innocent, but then once you start to be sucked into the poison of society in these particular structures and systems, you then start to live your life once you're conscious of what's going on with a mixed bag of feelings all the time. Anxiety, anger, fear, happy, and some of these things are sporadic. And so for me, it's a damn privilege to be black, and I recognize that, but society does not recognize the same privilege that I see. So when we have these conversations about white privilege and white people and white superiority, I get that, but I'm fucking proud to be black and to be in my skin, and I recognize the privilege, and society doesn't, and that's okay with me because I'm solid in who I am, where I come from, and I've grown into the person that I'm going to be, continue to be for the rest of my life, and where I come from, the community that I grew up in, and the people that I know have helped me build a foundation of who I am today. So basketball for me was the therapist I could never afford. It was the father figure that I always looked for. Basketball saved my life. In a lot of different ways. Certainly I got into some stuff, but basketball was the driver for me to go to school. It was the driver for me to go to different communities, and it was a vehicle by which I began to discover that this can take me places. I would do things in the pubs at the basketball court. I had this thing in my head. Every time a car drives by, this could be an opportunity. So every time a car would drive by, I'm going hard, running, layup, shooting, and doing my thing because I'm like, man, this could be the moment that this car stops and says, hey, come here, and they maybe give me an opportunity. And so being grounded in that mindset at that particular point at a young age, junior high, I would use that same mindset of, I don't know, who I'm meeting, where I'm going, but I'm always going to try to leverage other opportunities. In the community that I grew up in the pubs, in the home that I was raised in, seeing the dedication, determination by my mom, and the never quit and never die attitude, that's what propelled me into the work that I'm doing, and the mindset that I have. And the mindset is that I'm okay with failure. Failure is a part of life, and if I fail, I'm failing big, but I'm going to fail forward. I'm never going to fail backwards, and nobody's going to tell me that my vision isn't my vision. It's my vision, and it's the things that I want to do, and I'm going to do. And so language and mindset to me are very powerful, because it's a physical thrust into the world. If I say I'm going to do something, the world gets out of my way. People are going to start jumping into my life and helping me out. And so when I talk to young people, I tell them, tell somebody what you want to do every day, at least one person. Eventually the world is going to start moving out of your way. It's just going to move, and you're going to be walking through. So that mindset for me was built in the house, my mother, Kelly Symonds, and in the pubs at really late nights at the basketball court, just hoping, wishing for a better life as I shot that basketball. But for me, like basketball, like it's sport in general, but specifically basketball was a savior for me. Mentorship for me is a big one, because my biological father just wasn't around. He left when I was 4. I remember the story. I didn't see him again until prom, and I went to an after party, and it happened to be his house. That's 4 until 18. And so there was I had a stepfather around, and he was amazing. He passed away 7 years ago. And so, as a young black boy, just trying to find my way, mentorship for me was really important. And so at the St. Andrews Recreation Center in my community, I don't know what it was or what I was kind of giving off, but there were particular people that are still in my life today, Craig Myra and Maurice James, who gravitated towards me and took me under their wing and began to sort of mentor me. And so I was looking at folks at the recreation center almost as if, the father figure or the man that I never really had in my life. And, it's a big portion of shaping and molding a young man's life, because, if you don't have a mentor or someone positive to look up to, the streets or society or someone else will make a plan for you, and it may not always be the best one. And so mentorship is extremely important. And so that for me instilled a responsibility. Like it's a responsibility, however way you want to slice it, morally, professionally, and personally, that you have to give back. Like you have to. There's just no other option, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the facilities in my community, the people that gave to me. And so how dare I not give back? I have to give back and go back to those communities and those people that gave to me, and be a mentor and a voice for folks who may not have a voice, and folks who may be marginalized, and not have the same opportunities that I was able to get. And so when I'm at those tables and I'm advocating for certain things, I'm not advocating for just me. I'm advocating for the entire community that's not able to sit here with me, because I bring their voice, I bring their perspective, and I bring their passion, the same thing. And so mentorship is extremely important, and I think it's cornerstone to the development of a young person. It's just something we have to do, especially if you're black. One of the highest regards in black communities relationship, and it's one of the things that we hold true. And every time we see each other, the first question is, who's your people? We don't ask about where do you work. We don't ask about your assets. We want to know who your people are, so that we're able to be connected. And so relationship is one of those things, black community, that's held in high regard. And certainly, the quote that the African proverb that stands true is that it takes a village to raise a child. But an interesting perspective and spin that I have on that is that certainly it takes a village to raise a child, but what if that village is damaged from colonialism, racism, poverty, and all of the social stigmas that go with that? How is that village then raising that child? And that's not certainly a generalization of entire black communities, but there are ills that exist within our community that were not done by us. And so it takes a village to raise a child, but we have to we also have to heal that village at the same time, simultaneously as that child's being risen up. And so relationships are to me, and what I've experienced in the black community, are golden, because I can go to any black community and someone will invite me in for a meal. Somebody will ask who your people are. Somebody will want to know who I am. I don't get that same experience if I'm going to any other communities. I can say, growing up in the African Nova Scotian communities in HRM for my entire life, that relationships are extremely important. People want to know, and people need to know who you are so that they can draw connections. Being on the other side of the crowd it's it's a lot of different things. It's an energetic moment. It's also sad depending on what it is we're coming together about. And when we had the movements happening in Halifax, the Black Lives Matter movements and the rallies and the protests, it was energetic to be on the other side and being someone that was privileged enough and honored enough to be in that space to share my voice. But at the same time, there were many moments that I was crying, that I was tearing up, because I'm thinking that we have all of these people coming together just to fight for the fact and say that my life matters. And it's just such like a heart-wrenching notion that we have to gather, that we have to get tens of thousands of people to come together just to hear black people speak and say that my life matters and my life needs to be valued. And so, being the person or one of the people that is able to speak to a crowd it's an honor. It's an honor and it's a privilege that folks in the community hold you to a particular regard to hear what your voice and your experience is. But the other side of that, on the other side of that smile and that energy, is that sadness, because when the lights and the cameras and everything goes off, people put their phones down and social media stops talking, you have to sit with that. You have to sit with the fact that we're in this poisonous society where we have to get out in the streets just to scream and yell and say that my life matters. Stop killing us. We're saying stop killing us, and people are like, yeah, but it's not a debate. We're debating racism. We're debating cop killing. We're debating systemic racism. And when it comes to that shit, like, it's ridiculous to think about. It's ridiculous to think about. But forever, and as long as I do have a voice, and as long as the community allows me to, I'll hold the mic and I'll have something to say every single time. Because when it comes to this, I'm willing to take one on the chin. I'm willing to lose employment. I'm willing to do whatever, because I know that there's people, young people in the community, whether I like it or not, whether other people who are holding the mic like it or not, that are looking to see what you're going to say and what we're going to do. And 20 years from now, you don't want to be asking the question and thinking like, did I do all I could do? Did I do all that I could do for my community to advance? Because at the end of the day, when you're holding that mic, it's not about you. It's not about clout. It's not about social media. It's about advancing the conversation forward. It's about moving it forward. What are you going to do with the power that you have? With the power to hold that mic, what the fuck are you going to do? That's literally what it comes down to. What the fuck are you going to do, and what are you going to say? Because it has to be important. It has to be important. It's not about gaining followers. It's not about none of that. It's about advancing that conversation forward. And what are you saying to people? What are you saying to politicians? What are you saying to the crowd? Because that message is going to circulate and live forever and pop up as memories on people's social media, might come back in the news. And so when you're saying what you're saying, are you moving the conversation forward? And again, when everything goes down, when you have to reflect about the message that you're giving off and the things that you've said, it's a sobering moment to think about. We just gathered in the streets. We did something special, and it's something to be proud about, but we're gathering for me just to say my life matters, and people debate that. So I will say that I'm for what I'm about to talk about in terms of mental health, I'm a nationally certified counselor, so I have my Canadian counseling certification designation, and I did my master's of education in counseling. And so, speaking about mental health, it gives me a particular lens. And so when we're looking at and we're opening our phone to go onto our social media, and we see a person that looks like me, a black person that could have been me, and thinking this, we're watching a murder on social media. We're not supposed to see those things. We're not supposed to see murder, and the fact that we can see it over and over and over and over and over again, and people are sharing it, that brings about emotions. And so there's direct trauma, if you were there's vicarious trauma, and then there's third person trauma by, you might have just heard about the story, but you may not even have saw it. And so we have all of these waves of trauma that exist in this moment in the social media era, but then all of these historical and generational traumas that have happened year over year over year over year that we could date way back when they were taking African people and making them slaves. And so note that I didn't say slaves, they're African people that were meant to be slaves. And so, when we go back to those times and we talk about genetics and epigenetics and how those things become passed down over time through generation through generation through generation, then we're raising young people in these communities where we haven't healed from some of this stuff already. There weren't just waves of therapists coming and healthcare workers coming to save folks, African people who were going through these horrendous situations. And so we have these things, we're raising folks in these particular communities where we have resilient black people, resilient black leaders, and people in these communities who've made a way where there seemingly was not a way. But we're raising folks with these social ills that exist. And then now we get into the social media era where we're already suffering from all of these other different things. And then we can watch essentially yourself be murdered on tape over and over and over again. And what that does to your psyche, to your mental health, is extremely damaging. There were times where I was just crying. Like, I was just crying on the way to work, at work. I had to take time off of work because it really affects you, because you're thinking, that could be me, that could be my brother, that could be my friends. And you almost don't know what you want people to do, but you want people to help. You want people to jump in. And then on top of that, you have to go into the streets and scream and yell that your life matters. Dealing with all of that mental health and trauma, seeing police officers murder yourself, essentially. I've seen myself be murdered so many times over the summertime after Brother George Floyd, even right back to Trayvon Martin. And it does something to you. It changes the way, it changes your very perspective on how you see the world. It changes your very way of being. There's something about it that literally rocks you to the core when you see that stuff. I can't necessarily explain it, but rocks you to the core, shakes your entire world up. But then yet, you're expected to then go function in society as if everything is all good, as if everything is okay. And going to work and seeing, white folks and people who are not black, and they're talking to you and you're just not really registering because you're dealing with a whole other thing. And so there's a lot of layers to this. There's the epigenetics of trauma from our ancestors. There's the community ills that we've been dealing with historically and generationally. And then we get to, again, the social media era, and then what you're dealing with. And so we have this whole backpack of shit that we're literally saying, help me, I need help. And people are like, yeah, but we need a new art gallery in the city, and so we're not really gonna go there. And so it's a lot to carry. One of my friends, Trevor, who had passed away, black teacher, he would always talk about a knapsack. And so, using that theory and that notion is that we got a lot of shit in our knapsack that we're carrying. And so think about, a young kid walking to school with the invisible knapsack, and their back is bent because there's so much in there. Then you get to that door of the school, you get in class, and then you're expected to sit down and learn. You might not have had food, you might have dealt with racism, you might have just saw someone get killed on social media. But then you get in those doors and the teachers don't even talk about that. then you go home and you go to your recreation center, or police stop you, and you're expected to then act accordingly and behave. But all of this stuff plays on your mental psyche, and plays with your emotions in terms of anxiety, in terms of fear, and you act on that. That stuff builds up. And people, if we don't know and if we don't have the proper tools and the proper coping mechanisms to deal with this, that's why. And I still do some of this stuff. Is the young brothers in the hood is like, when someone passes away, let's get the bottles, let's get some weed, like let's go chill and let's drink to the person that we lost. That's not necessarily a healthy coping mechanism, but who is coming into our communities to help these young people and these young brothers and sisters to get through this stuff? We don't have just droves of social workers coming into our communities that are coming in to help these people out, but yet then we want to look at these communities and blame these people for the things that they're doing. But you're not willing to help. You're not willing to invest resources into these particular communities. And so when young people experience trauma, and their response to trauma is anger and more violence, you want to blame them. But we need people and we need resources in our communities to help out. So when I think about historical figures, certainly, of course, I center myself around Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. I have a good understanding of those movements. I empathize and tear up when I think about Emmett Till, and most recently George Floyd, and all of the other folks that we've lost. But I also am extremely inspired by young people in our Halifax community. So I center my thinking and some of my thoughts around those historical movements, but I try to stay in the present, in the here and now, with what some of the young people are doing right now. Because young people aren't the future, they're the right now. And so how can I influence and play a part in any way in the future of a young person, so that we don't have to continue to have this same conversation and asking another young black person, who are the historical figures that you center yourself around? Because we want to create a different history and a different vision and future forward. But certainly, folks, African Nova Scotian folks that I may miss some, but some folks that have sort of led the way and have mentored me in some ways. Of course, I've mentioned Maurice James, Kenneth Fells, Marcus James, Senator Bernard, Dr. Lynn Jones, L. Jones, Kate McDonald, Trayvon Clayton. There's a long list of folks right now who are doing things and revolutionizing the way that black people move, organize, and gather. And so, although I center my thoughts and movements in those historical figures, it's important for me to stay in the right now, so that we can take stock in these moments right now and influence the future right now, by mentoring, being a part of, and taking it as a responsibility to do good in your community. It's a responsibility. If you have children, you're responsible for their well-being, and at that same level of responsibility, you have to take that into your community and do the work. No excuses. You just have to get it done. So when I think about messages to give to young people, one that sticks and stands for me is that aspire to live a life that outlives you. When I expire, when I'm gone, what was my contribution to society? What did I do? What was my contribution to this movement right now? When people look back 20 years from now, what did DeRico Symonds do? What did I do? So live a life that outlives you. The other one is that, we have somewhat a distorted vision of what success is. Success is not having the most money. Success is not having, acquiring the most assets. The level of success and how I gauge that and to young people is how many people can you inspire? The more people that you inspire, for me, is the desirable level of success. And then the third one is, you got to get shit done. You know, we've come a long way, and there's still a lot of work to be done, but we have to go out and get it. Nobody is going to give it to you. No one's going to give you anything. We have to work for it, and hard work works. And hard work works, and tell somebody every single day what it is that you want to do. The world is going to get out of your way. But at the end of the day, do it your way. We have to get shit done. A lot of work.